It's quite an introduction. I'm not really sure how to follow that. Vince and I decided this year we'd try and have as many accents on stage as possible, so thanks for bearing with us. This next session is actually going to be a really interactive session. We have a great panel lineup talking about this great topic of customer obsession. Now, you've seen, if you've been to Dreamforce before, many great topics really focused about becoming a customer company, and clearly it's something that's very important for Salesforce. We've brought up these three big companies who are going to share with you their experience of what customer obsession really means to them. And I think for many people, many organizations, it's very easy to say, oh, we're customer focused, we're customer obsessed, they're always at the middle. But as we can all relate to, we know that if we have customers, happy customers, and we're putting them at the middle, it's ultimately going to turn into more revenue, it's going to make them stickier, and they're going to be happy customers, and they're going to be advocates for us. So I'm going to welcome up our four panelists up onto the stage, and then we'll do some introductions. So welcome up, Walter.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Pleasure. Yeah.
Cool. So Walter, why don't you just tell us about why we have these people on stage, where they've come from, and what the group is.
Yeah. So in the spirit of customer obsession and what Tiffany mentioned about making this about the customer, and Dreamforce is the ultimate customer event, we thought, why not let some of our clients share their experiences in their transformational journeys that they started, in some cases, a few years ago. And it's a pleasure to have all of you on stage. Seth, Melissa, Joe, thank you so much for joining us. And there's copies of a magazine in the back of the room for anybody that wants to pick it up. Their stories are actually shared in the Enterprise Learning magazine. They were all winners in the top 10 this year, so let's give them a hand for that. Congratulations.
So why don't we grab a seat, feel comfortable, and I'll go to the other end. And let's start off with some introductions. Walter, let's just start with yourself. If people aren't familiar with your business, maybe give it a bit of intro on yourself.
Sure, I run a company called CCI Global Holdings. We're a sales performance transformation organization. We operate globally, and we've been in business, well, our businesses have been in business for over 30 years at this point. So.
Perfect. And then Joe?
My name is Joe Anzalone. I oversee global sales training and enablement for Amazon Web Services. I've been there since last July.
Perfect.
Good morning, I'm Melissa Nelson-Tate. I am leading the sales excellence transformation for Ingersoll Rand. And Ingersoll Rand has been around for about 140 years. We've got about 6,000 salespeople. And our products you might recognize: Trane heating and air conditioning, Club Car golf carts, Thermo King transport, refrigeration units, and of course Ingersoll Rand, air systems, power tools, material handling equipment. It's a diverse business.
Hi everyone, I'm Seth Bartlett. I'm the Global Chief Operating Officer for Sapientnitro. I've been there for 21 years, so most of my life. We actually got acquired by Publicis 2 years ago, so we now actually are dealing with a journey that we started, which was initially about upgrading our approach to building a view of the customer for Sapient. And now inside of Publicis, we're part of a larger solution hub that includes two other brands, Razorfish and Digitas. So there's a real challenge around how we integrate a number of different approaches and cultures there for the outcomes that we're looking for.
Perfect. Well, Seth, let's stick with you and go back to the title of the presentation. So, customer obsession, what does that mean to you and within your organization?
Well, I think the answer to that question is complicated, because what it's meant to Sapient traditionally, the legacy of our company was around technology, and we evolved many times over the years, in some cases to survive. And we have Sapientnitro is about $1 billion in annual revenue, with about 10,000 employees and 6,000 or so in India. So our core values and our culture in the early days was very much around delivering for the client. And so our focus was on doing great work. And as we turn more into an agency, and with the acquisition from Publicis, we have many folks that are driven off of just doing great work and winning awards. And I think the opportunity and the challenge and where we're trying to shift our business is to have a greater emphasis and focus on the ultimate impact and outcome that means the most to the client, not necessarily whether or not the team is enjoying the work and winning awards. That's important as well. So customer obsession for us is creating a stronger, more meaningful connection with our customer, understanding what's important to their customers, and looking at the long term beyond just the immediate project that we're working on.
Perfect. Melissa.
Thank you. At Ingersoll Rand, our vision is to create a world of sustainable progress with enduring results, which is pretty aspirational. And we believe we can do that by delivering solutions and services that are sustainable and meet the needs of our customers in improving the world to meet their business goals. That's really far from our salespeople, but it all starts and ends with the customer, and it requires that our salespeople are seen as a valued business partner, a strategic business partner to that customer. To get them a seat at the table, we need them to be delivering meaningful, consistent experiences with the customer that are based on best practices that help the customer to solve the needs that they have. And we are very focused on developing our salespeople to have meaningful interactions with the customer, and particularly through our sales managers and the coaching that they can do with their salespeople to ensure that salespeople are leveraging these best practices and having meaningful interactions with the customers every day, in every interaction with every customer, and every opportunity.
Cool. Joe.
What was the question?
Customer obsession. So to avoid it being a catchphrase, what does it mean specifically within your organization?
Well, Amazon Web Services has 72 platform services, over 722 features and updates to those services. And most of those come from interactions with customers. So we have a lot of technologists, a lot of solution architects talking to customers, then going off and actually innovating to create either a feature or a platform service that our customers can use. That is great, but up and down the stack, it creates issues with our sales force. So they expected to then know every single platform service. So we take our sales force back to not what the services are, but what they do for customers. So if we talk about analytics services, or we talk about our storage or compute services, it's not so much technologically what they do, but what problem do they solve for customers? And then, as Tiffany mentioned earlier, what does that actually do for the customer's customer in real time? So in areas like healthcare and areas like space exploration, education, we train our sales force to actually think about, at the very end of the day, what is that user going to experience? And to embed that in a selling force isn't that easy. So we've come with the customer at the center and the customer's customer in the center, training them around that paradigm. That's what it means to us.
Perfect. And Walter, obviously, you work with many other organizations as well. Where would you say, and particularly for people in the audience, where should organizations start when thinking about how to make this transformation?
Well, I would say that all three of these organizations are represented here on stage. None of them really had a problem, right? They're all very successful companies. And you don't need to have a problem in order to make the decision to make a transformational shift. Oftentimes it's about little tiny changes, 2-millimeter changes as we call them, that can help make a huge impact. And I mean, it's the obvious answer. Obviously you want to start with the customer and work backwards, but really spend time understanding what the problems are that the customers are trying to solve, their customers, as Tiffany mentioned before, and then don't try to boil the ocean, right? Pick 1 or 2 initiatives and start the process in a way that you can create some quick wins. That's what every one of these companies here has done, right? They didn't try to boil the ocean. And by beginning that way, you start to get momentum and you can start to layer other activities on top of one early win, so.
Perfect. And so let's maybe understand a little bit within your organizations, what are some of the steps that you've taken so far in order to really move or change this culture? Maybe Melissa, let's start off with yourself.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier that we have nearly 10,000 salespeople internally and through our channels representing Ingersoll Rand with the customer, interacting with the customer, and that we're relying on. And we knew that we couldn't meaningfully and effectively touch every single one of those salespeople the way that we need to in order to ensure that they are having meaningful interactions with customers to help solve and achieve the goals of those customers. So our focus is on our sales managers. We have about 1,000 sales managers across Ingersoll Rand. And we focus on the sales managers, and the first thing that we did is we established best practices for sales managers. And that is actually based on Walter's book, Pathways to Growth, the program Pathways to Growth, and it is a fundamental processes that we look for sales managers to execute and lead their teams on a daily basis. And so we see our sales managers and our sales teams knowing what to expect every day that they come to work, every interaction that they have with their sales manager, and to focus on executing to those processes the best that they can. The other thing that we did with that, in addition to the sales management process, is we developed a customized coaching program for sales managers to put them into the position of a leader as coach, and to step away from and step back from their tendency to be solving the deals and taking over the customer interactions from their salespeople, and to really be focused on developing their salespeople to become great and intimate with their customers. So that is number two. And then the third is relying on the pipeline and relying on data and using data to understand the outcomes of behaviors of our salespeople and of our sales managers, for our salespeople to see how they can use that pipeline data to prioritize, to plan, to strategize, and to make decisions as a team with their sales manager and with their customer on a regular basis.
Perfect, thanks. Seth, how about yourself?
Sure, I think a little context just organizationally would help if I explain. So when we got acquired, we had two Sapient brands. Sapientnitro is the digital marketing brand that I mentioned I'm the COO for, but we also had a brand called Sapient Consulting. So those two brands got combined with Razorfish and Digitas, which are two other very successful and respected brands doing digital marketing work. So the first challenge that we immediately had is, aside from some different cultures, each of those, the two Sapient brands are on the same platform, because we rolled out Salesforce, and Walter had actually helped us in developing an approach to engage our executives and drive adoption, as Tiffany talked about, convey the benefit and utility such that people opt in and begin to use the platform because they see the benefit and the value. But when we added Digitas and Razorfish, we then had two other brands that were in some cases using spreadsheets and disconnected Salesforce orgs in kind of small pockets. So how do you get those four brands on one platform with openness, transparency that can facilitate collaboration, when inside of the holding company, traditionally the approach is isolation and fragmentation, or you're competing against each other as brands. So we had and we have a lot of obstacles to go up against there. It's changing the orientation that people have, where in the past they actually would look at their contacts and their opportunities as something that they want to protect and not let anyone else see. The expectation of our executives and CEOs is actually to create transparency and visibility and ultimately facilitate collaboration. But that's easier said than done. When you have someone that has a sales quota, and maybe in the past they've been burned by somebody picking up their contact and calling into to their client to take the business. So there's a lot of focus where we are in the journey around changing that orientation. It's not something that you can just convince someone that it's the right thing to do. They have to actually see it, and that takes time. That might be something as simple as a global account that crosses 3 of the 4 brands, realizing that if they come together and they connect around a new opportunity, it's greater value and greater impact to the client. But that has to actually happen for then others to look at it and start to believe and say, wait a minute, maybe this is a better way to work. And we've worked closely with Walter's company around how we can start that change process at the top with executives, because we found that when our executives change the way that they interact with teams around pitches and managing through the sales stage process, it pulls other people into the platform, versus if we try and push them in and say, you got to do this because we need a view into the forecast and the pipeline, and we want to compete better. So it takes more patience than I think what I had ever imagined it was going to take, but we're very committed to it.
Yeah, I mean, many organizations obviously have that decision to make. Do they enforce stuff top down? But in general, it sounds like it's just not a successful approach, and you really need to focus on what's the value add for your executives, for your sales professionals, and so on.
I think there is some stuff some things, messaging that can be conveyed top down around purpose and vision and articulating a compelling future, and that can be powerful. But to get the change, it has to come from within, and it can't just be a mandate.
Perfect, thanks. And so Joe, what are some of the steps that you started to take within Amazon Web Services?
So about a year ago, we decided to take a problem-solving approach with our sales force from an enablement perspective. And it sounds kind of mundane, but we really start with the way in which we bring them into the organization. Because any of you who are familiar with AWS know that we hire, we live according to our leadership principles. So that's great, and that results in a lot of people that want to get a lot of things done at once because we have this bias for action leadership principle and this our right a lot leadership principle. So we have a lot of great people that all have opinions in the same room. So that's great. So then to solve that, when we put them through the initial enablement plan, we give them a problem-solving type of approach. They get into groups, and they have to work their way through a customer case study wherein they have to make certain decisions as they approach that customer. The case study or two that we use are kind of sprawling, very realistic customer scenarios where they have to address issues with aging infrastructure, cloud computing challenges, all that go back to their customer experience, and then they have to team up in groups and solve those challenges. And we prefer that approach to the typical PowerPoint delivery, give a test approach, because I was a seller and I know that their attention span is probably like this, and I probably lost about 40 of you already just talking right now. Those that are laughing are actually listening to me. And then after that, we have to follow up with kind of a coaching paradigm. So we team with Walter's company, and we have a one-on-one coaching office hours type paradigm, whereas they go through problems and issues in the field with customers. They have access to somebody in Walter's organization that can coach them through particular account issues, organizational challenges they're having with that account, and how then to drive that account to the next level of cloud adoption. So it's a long process to implement with a lot of type A, bias for action type of people. But in a year, we've come a long way. I mean, teaming up with Cloud Coaching International to the point where now we're getting requests from other parts of the organization that aren't sellers, our solution architects, our enterprise support, our marketing people that actually want to go through the sales training, which is interesting to train them in selling.
Perfect. We have a few more questions, but then we will open it up to everyone in the audience, so feel free to start thinking about some of the questions you may want to ask as well. Walter, when organizations are listening to this and setting their goals, how big do you go? I mean, it's very easy to say, hey, we want to transform our whole company, and I want to be just like this. But it's obviously equally important to figure out what are the baby steps or mini goals in order to achieve that ultimate goal.
So it's very contextual. It depends on where the company is, their journey, what problem it is that they're trying to solve. And here we have 3 different problems that were being solved, right? But it was the beginning point. In Joe's case, it was a standardized selling methodology that was going to be used globally in what is, I think, the fastest IT growing company ever in the history of all companies. You didn't even exist 10 years ago, and now you're in a $12 billion run rate. So imagine getting the attention of salespeople that are in that environment, right? So that was that problem, that challenge. In Melissa's case, it was standardizing a sales management methodology. And in Seth's case, it was about collaboration, visibility, and transparency. So they had 3 different objectives, but in all 3 cases, the common thread that's making these projects work is fortitude and stamina, because these things don't go easily most of the time. You will run into speed bumps along the way, internal, external, and as long as there's clarity and purpose and vision, which has to come at the highest level, which was the case in all 3 of these organizations, you push through those barriers. And you actually create a situation, I call it creative conflict, where the better ideas come out as a result of those speed bumps. And so it's just very contextual. You have to pick, the one spot where each of your companies needs to pay the most attention to get the maximum amount of leverage. Start there and then layer on top of it. Like in Melissa's case, I know her next process is going to be around, or her next project is around sales process that's going to layer with sales management. If you try to tackle both at the same time, it can be difficult. So.
And obviously all 3 of your organizations, global organizations, how do you get the right balance between doing everything from HQ centrally versus going out there in the hubs and ultimately not just having a great culture at the hub, but everywhere as well?
That's a great question. Actually, I love answering that question because we have 11 different business units, and when you factor in the global nature of our company, we're more like 20 different businesses that we're working with, and this is a centrally driven effort. But it has to be at the pull, the request, the desire of the businesses to see sales capability improvement as a key lever in achieving the goals that they have as a business. And so we are not mandating it. Over time, there will be an expectation that we all are operating our sales organizations the same way, but it's not a mandate. It's at the request of the business to do this. And we have a small team centrally working on sales management process. We're also deploying Salesforce.com as our pipeline tool and beginning our sales process. But what we do have is we have representatives within the businesses, leads within each business who know that business that we partner very closely with. And one of the great things about our sales management program and Pathways to Growth is that it's very adaptable to any business in any region, any culture. We have deployed this now globally, multi-channel, multi-product line, and it's effectively the same process no matter where you go that sales managers are leading their teams with. But they believe that it's their process. They believe that it was developed for them, that it's been customized to them, and we don't tell them that, well, if you go somewhere else, you'll see that it looks very much the same, but it works. So we rely very much on experts, subject matter experts, who have a selling background, who have the credibility and the relationships within the business to be able to speak to and make decisions for the business, and we do this together. And it's very much it's a small team centrally, but it's a big team across the enterprise. And the other piece that is absolutely critical and probably the biggest challenge that we have had in deploying this is I mentioned the coaching capability that we're building in our sales managers. The way that we do that is through business unit coaches who are focusing on modeling and developing and inspecting not only the process, the sales management process, but really the coaching skills of our sales managers. And this is new for them. They're hungry for it. They love the idea of being able to be developed as coaches, and that business unit coach role is critical. We've also been fortunate to tap into Walter's master coach practice and to have coaches at the top level developing our business unit coaches who in turn are developing our sales managers. And those two pieces have really been the key to how we can do this globally across such a diverse set of businesses in a very consistent and effective way.
And so Seth, you've talked about the different businesses that have obviously merged. Have you found any regional nuances or any areas of the world that you've needed to spend more focus on in order to ensure consistency?
Yeah, I think that it was something that we identified right out of the gate that was going to be a challenge because Digitas and Razorfish operate in a very regional way. So you'd find that even the set of sales stages that would be used within 3 or 4 different regions inside of North America would vary, even within a region, which was hard to kind of grasp. But so that existed, and we went out of the gate with this idea that, okay, we're going to have to involve a lot of people. We're going to create a team that has a lot of representation. But I'm not even sure that I have the answer of how to go about it, because I've been amazed to find that messages that I thought were very clearly communicated and understood, you then go and examine, the outcome, and you'd have pockets of salespeople that would say, "Oh, this is really a finance and an operations tool. So we're not really going to use it. Just finance will update, our forecast numbers every 3 or 4 weeks." And it's just an eye opener when you say that's not at all what we were going for. So I think you have to take the obvious steps of not having it be the ivory tower, and of not assuming that one message is gonna sit with everyone, and be prepared for that scratch the head moment when you encounter for whatever reasons a group that you do need to connect to that's disconnected and not either in the loop or perhaps not even aligned. Just recently, I think last week, heard of one of the brands. It's kind of a sub-brand because, again, in the holding company, you can have one brand that's comprised of a number of acquisitions. And the CTO of kind of this one region, everyone has a C-level title, it seems, in the agency space, had looked at the platform and said, "Oh, we're not going to use it. I think we're just going to continue to use spreadsheets." And my first reaction was to laugh, like he doesn't realize that it's not his decision. I mean, everyone's going to be using this. But that obviously doesn't solve the problem either. And then the question becomes, well, why did we get into that spot? How do we have the right set of conversations to reach alignment? And it's not easy. It does take a tremendous amount of fortitude, as Walter mentioned. So it's been a resetting of kind of expectation around the timeline that's going to take in a large global business.
Okay. Joe, anything you want to add in terms of acting internationally and rolling out globally?
Yeah, with regards to working with different geos around the world, first thing you have to do is understand you have to walk the walk. That means if you're rolling out some type of enablement plan or platform where everyone needs to buy in, you don't have a webinar at 2 a.m. their time, which I have seen in other organizations. We sit here and we say, we're a global company, everyone's on board. If you don't mind rolling out of bed at 2 a.m. in Singapore to be on this webinar. And that sounds simple, but for some reason, it happens all the time. Secondly, understand, talking more about Asia Pacific now, that Asia Pac is not a country. Every flight is at least 8 hours. For some reason, sometimes you're sitting back in the corporate office in the US thinking that, oh, they're in APAC, they can get all on the phone. Well, no, the guy in Melbourne can't get on the phone at the same time as the guy in Beijing. So just understanding the challenges that exist over there, not just from a perspective of they feel isolated and they feel very much disconnected from the corporate office, but also culturally how they operate, how they traditionally might sell in that space, and then how they view technology and how they view things like regulation, outside market pressures, market and economic conditions. All of those things are not a given, even from a simple baseline of how we view those things in the United States and even EMEA. So we have to walk the walk when we're launching any type of enablement plan to understand culturally out of the gate we're going to adjust these things. In real time, on the ground, I mean, something that we do at AWS is ensure when we're working through a problem, that problem and that case study is culturally relevant to that particular geo. And we work a lot with Walter's team on going global. So we employ his resources around the world to ensure that our people are in country, they're there, they're reinforced, they coach in country, and we're not, coaching at an inconvenient time or some person they can reach out to really that's in country for them.
I would say a couple of observations that I've had and how you guys have tackled the global kind of integration is, in your case, Seth, you've taken tremendous steps and time to really get executives on board with each other. You've sponsored and fostered a lot of dialogue, and companies have these big visions for these projects, but taking the time that you've taken to make that vision become their vision and communicating it to their team in a way that makes sense to them, so it's personal. We've seen that make a big impact in how people get on board with the program and the change initiative that's underway. But again, you got to do it over and over and over again. And in your case, Melissa, the approach you've taken is you've got this global template for the program, but you go to each business unit and you allow them to tailor that template, so it does become theirs. So even though 80% of it might be consistent, that 20% variability is what makes it feel like it's theirs, right? That's customer obsession. They're your customer. And in Joe's case, there's a really extensive interviewing process that occurs between the coaches that are deployed or resources that are deployed in a region and in that region itself, so that they also feel like they're part of that decision-making process as to who it is that's going to help them with the transformation process versus somebody saying, here I am, we're going to fix everything and leave. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. So let's talk about the end goal, if there is an end goal. Joe, what's the big goal within AWS?
Well, with regard to sales enablement globally, one of the key metrics we look at speed to productivity, and also because of our culture of customer obsession, we look for customer wins and we track those. It comes down to real-time coaching. In fact, some of our top enablement coaches are here in the audience today, sitting there in the middle. If you ever want to talk to anybody who knows this, Cameron Tanner and Rob Dalto right there. They are instrumental to our effort to make sure that whatever we deliver in an event type scenario, a 2-day event, it becomes a long-term process about obsessing about our customers, right? So if we're following some type of methodology, it's pretty rare that methodology will take hold unless there's constant real-time coaching going on in the field. So we have, in addition to Walter's resources, guys like this who come from storied and diverse backgrounds to help us with that, to really measure speed to productivity, customer wins. We obviously have several stages of cloud adoption that we look at. So we want to make sure we're meeting customers in their cloud journey no matter where they are, whether they be a territory, smaller customer, large enterprise, strategic, global customer. They are an organization that has certain goals, problems to solve, and that we're obsessing about solving those problems, tracking those problems being solved, you know, and where appropriate, sharing those stories with the rest of the field.
Perfect. Melissa.
Thanks. I couldn't disagree with anything that Joe just said. It all applies as well to Ingersoll Rand. It's about how do we ensure that our salespeople are in position to work with customers, to solve their business problems, to meet their goals every day in everything that they do and every interaction that they have. I do feel like we're still, even though we're 2.5 years into this journey, and it feels like we're still so much at the beginning because there's so much to do. With every layer of the onion we peel back, there are more and more added every time. So we are about halfway through the company with our sales management work. We have begun to deploy Salesforce as our standard pipeline tool to really focus on using data to inform how we spend our time, who we spend our time with, and what we are doing and the outcomes of that work. But we have a long ways to go with that. And then Walter had mentioned as well that we are now focusing on sales process. So it was funny when we first started on sales management. The sales manager said, well, when are you going to give us the stuff that tells us like what our salespeople should be doing? And basically the answers to the questions they're getting on a daily basis, the more technical side of selling. So that's what we're working on right now, is best practices for opportunity management that is aligned to the buying process. We very much know that it's not about how we want to sell, it's about how our customer wants and needs to buy. And so how do we give our salespeople and our sales managers the tools to recognize that and to know what that looks like, and to ensure that they are applying that as often as they possibly can, as well as account management. Best practices in account management, we've probably got 6,000 of them across the company with our 6,000 salespeople. And over half of our new business comes from existing customers, maybe even close to 75% in a lot of our businesses. So strong account management, being that strategic partner to our customers, is critical to being able to grow and deliver the solutions that we see we can provide to our customers to help them achieve their goals. And that means continuing to reinvest in coaching, coaching resources for our sales managers, coaching capability of our sales managers and our business unit coaches, and then seeing where that goes. From a systematic perspective, our Salesforce focus is very much on pipeline management, and we have started to look at marketing enablement, lead development, lead identification, lead management, but there's so much power in the tool that we can use to connect together the whole front end of the business, from the marketing all the way through lead management, opportunity management, account management, and then it all comes back around, that data comes back around to feed the cycle. So we're really excited about the potential we have there, but just scratching the surface at this point.
Perfect. Seth?
For us, I think it's not losing sight of the ultimate objective of greater, longer-term impact and outcomes for the clients with experience at the forefront at every step. It's so easy to get focused on the moving parts, and we can add on this capability, and we can focus on. I mean, Melissa talked about a ton of things that are important to us, and I find that each one of those things in and of itself brings great challenge and opportunity, but it can take on a life of its own and pull you away from the mission that you have to remind yourself of and your people every day, which is, what are you really trying to accomplish? It's not just about pipeline management. That's a means to the end. So that's what we've really tried to do, and we don't always do it well. We dive right into, you know, an analytics problem, or the latest conversation with my the Publicis.Sapient CFO is implementing a contract management tool. And that's very exciting to me, being in an operations leadership role, but that in and of itself is also not going to help us achieve that ultimate outcome. So that's what we're trying to do, is keep a line of sight to that longer term place that we know we're going to get to.
Perfect. So we have 2 microphones at the back. If anyone has any questions, feel free to head over to those and stand up. One question from me, just whilst anyone walks over there, maybe in 1 minute answer, like what would you do differently, or what's one lesson that you've learned that you could share with these people here? Maybe Seth, let's start with yourself.
Well, I mentioned 21 years at Sapient, so I had some naivete, I think, coming into a $13 billion French-owned holding company, where things that I'm used to getting done in 3 to 4 weeks prior to the acquisition, now 5 months, you know. And so I think what I would do differently is I would set expectations differently. I'd be super aggressive in the things that I know we could have been more effective in moving the needle on. I think that Walter, for instance, engaged with some of our executives in a really powerful and meaningful way, pulling them into early conversations to ask them to kind of write their own story and talk about their vision. And this was done where they were on the calls at the same time, so they're hearing each other talk about it. And I think that was incredibly impactful, so obviously very thankful for Walter for doing that. But with any program, you have your limitations around how many of those sessions you can do, and we're squeezing Walter to do more with less. And I think we missed the opportunity to take some of those things that had all the right ideas and got people having the right conversations. But then what happens after a really powerful meeting? You go back to looking at your pipeline, or focusing on the pitch or the RFP, or dealing with the cost-cutting stuff and all the realities that we deal with, and the story kind of fades, you know, to the background. So it's really focusing on the things that are most important, and not being pulled into those things that are most urgent, but often not actually the important things.
Perfect. Melissa?
A few things that we've learned along the way and really tried to reinforce as we continue our progression, I think is consistent with what these guys have said, particularly starting with top-down engagement. Not only engagement and endorsement, but actual participation and involvement. And if they're not participating and modeling and supporting and coaching themselves, then it doesn't work. So we've had to continue to work very hard at ensuring that from the beginning, the sales leaders and the business leaders are involved. And then the other thing, I think I would say the same as what Seth said. It's really about being very laser focused on the goal and the intended outcomes, and continuing to learn along the way, because everything does grow and compound, and it can get very complex and overwhelming. And ensuring that we just continue to come back and revisit, what are we here to do, how are we doing it, how is it working, and stay focused on that.
Perfect. Joe?
Quite simply, I'd focus less on worrying about organizational alignment and if everybody's on board, because you're just chasing your tail when you do that, particularly at AWS, when there's a lot of little teams going off, doing their own thing. That is a way of life. And get out there and tactically get some wins with the sales force, because that's really where the learning happens. It doesn't happen in a meeting room where everyone agrees on something, because ultimately that changes anyway.
Yeah. Walter, any closing thoughts from yourself?
For me, it's just been an honor to work with these companies. I've learned so much in each of your unique situations, and it's made us realize the importance of customer obsession as really becoming a centerpiece of everything that you do, literally everything that you do.